Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehani and these are the headlines. Israeli forces have wounded at least 400 Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. The Palestinian Red Crescent Society said they were protesting against illegal Israeli settlements. The Taliban have condemned US airstrikes on some provinces in Afghanistan, saying they will respond to such provocations. In a tweet, the group said the US must focus on withdrawal instead of prolonging the war. Earlier, a US media report claimed that the US launched drone strikes against Taliban positions in northern Afghanistan. Pakistan's foreign minister says some powers want the country to remain on the Financial Action Task Force's grey list. In a statement, Shah Mahmood Qureshi said the forum has to decide if it is technical or a political one. He said there is no room to keep Pakistan on the grey list after Islamabad implemented 26 of the forum's 27 action plans. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says soft image of a country can't be built by copying any foreign culture. He was addressing an award ceremony of the National Amateur Short Film Festival in Islamabad. In his remarks, Army's spokesperson Major General Babar Iftikhar said Pakistan won the war on terror. The Australian city of Sydney has gone into a 2-week lockdown to contain the highly contagious Delta COVID-19 variant. Meanwhile, the US drug regulator has added warning labels to Pfizer and Moderna vaccines to indicate the rare risk of heart inflammation. In Pakistan, 36 died, while over 900 tested positive in the last 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed over 3.9 million lives and infected more than 118 million people. Detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now with the news in detail. Israeli forces have injured at least 400 Palestinians in the Beita town and Nablus city in the occupied West Bank. Palestinians were protesting against the illegal Israeli settlements. Palestinian Red Crescent Society said 69 Palestinians suffered injuries from rubber-coated bullets. Palestinians have been staging protests since early May after settlers occupied Abu Sabi mountain and installed an outpost. Meanwhile, in the central West Bank, colonialist settlers burnt dozens of fig and olive trees. The Taliban have condemned US airstrikes on some provinces in Afghanistan, saying they will respond to such provocations. In a tweet, the group said the US must focus on withdrawal instead of prolonging the war. Earlier, a US media report claimed that the US launched drone strikes against Taliban positions in northern Afghanistan. Meanwhile, in an interview, Taliban spokesperson Suhail Shaheen said the group is providing US forces a secure passage to withdraw. But he warned that the group will react if Washington keeps troops in Washington. President Joe Biden says US support for Afghanistan will be sustained despite the pullout. He made the remarks during a meeting with Afghan President Ashraf Ghani and Chief Negotiator Abdullah at the Oval Office.
US President said the senseless violence in Afghanistan has to end. Biden reiterated that Afghans are going to have to decide their future. For his part, President Ghani said Washington's withdrawal decision is a sovereign one, and it is Kabul's job to manage consequences. He said the Afghan forces have prioritized their actions and are fully prepared for their job. Ghani claimed Afghan security forces had retaken 6 districts from the Taliban. The president called on the Taliban to agree on a ceasefire and engage in a political settlement. Meanwhile, in an interview after the meeting, Abdullah said peace talks should not be abandoned despite surging attacks unless the Taliban themselves pull out.
Pakistan's foreign minister says some powers want the country to remain on the Financial Action Task Force's grey list. In a statement, Shah Mahmood Qureshi said the watchdog has to decide if it is a technical or a political forum. He said the FATF acknowledged that Pakistan implemented 26 of 27 action plans and significant progress on the 27th one. The foreign minister feared that the forum is being used for political purposes. Qureshi noted it is in Pakistan's interest to stop money laundering and terror financing. The UN nuclear watchdog has asked Iran for an immediate reply on whether it will extend a monitoring deal that expired overnight. In a statement, the International Atomic Energy Agency summarized a report to its 35-nation Board of Governors. Chief Rafael Grossi stressed the vital importance of continuing its data collection on some of Tehran's activities. Responding to the remarks, Iran's envoy in Vienna, Kazim Garibabadi, said Tehran is under no obligation to provide an answer. On May the 26th, Iran and the agency extended the deal for a month, allowing the watchdog to collect data on some of Tehran's activities. A U.S. State Department official said Iran should engage the agency for it to monitor Tehran's compliance with the 2015 nuclear deal. However, Iran's foreign ministry said Tehran will only return to full compliance after the verifiable removal of sanctions. Earlier, the U.S. and France warned that time is running out for Tehran to revive the deal. In Niger, armed assailants have killed 19 civilians in the western Tillaberi region near the border with Mali. The local mayor said 3 people were killed in the village while others in the fields. The region is riddled with violence where militants previously focused attacks on security forces. However, in recent months, terrorists have been drawn into local ethnic conflicts, leading to greater violence against civilians. 137 civilians were killed in March, while 100 in January in suspected ISIS attacks. In Mali, 6 soldiers have been killed while 13 UN peacekeepers have been injured in 2 separate attacks. Malian army said one of its soldiers was also wounded in the attack in the Mopti region of central Mali. Meanwhile, a car bomb targeted a temporary base set up by the peacekeepers near a village in the Gao region in northern Mali. German Defense Minister Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer said 12 injured belong to her country. In a statement, she said 3 German peacekeepers are severely wounded. The area has an active presence of insurgents linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. The UN mission in Mali has deployed over 13,000 soldiers to contain violence by armed groups in the north of the country. In the U.S. state of Minnesota, former policeman Derek Chauvin has been sentenced to 22.5 years in prison over the murder of George Floyd. He was convicted of a second and a third-degree murder and other charges last month.
The hearing began with prosecutors asking several members of Floyd's family to address the court. The judge, Peter Cahill, said the handed jail term is based on Chauvin's abuse of a position of authority. He said his decision is not based on public opinion, but it is important to recognize the pain of the Floyd family. The prosecutors had asked for a 30-year prison sentence, while the defense was seeking probation. At the White House, President Joe Biden said the sentence seemed appropriate. But Floyd's brother and his nephew criticized the sentence as a slap on the wrist. However, the family's lawyer, Dan Crump, termed the court's decision historic, saying it brings the nation a step closer to healing. Before the sentence was handed down, Chauvin himself briefly offered condolences to the Floyd family.
At this time, due to some additional legal matters at hand, I'm not able to give a full formal statement at this time. But very briefly, though, I do want to give my condolences to the Floyd family. There's going to be some other information in the future that would be of interest, and I hope things will give you some peace of mind.
Floyd's murder last May triggered the Black Lives Matter movement across the U.S. and the world.
The U.S. drug regulator has added warning labels to Pfizer and Moderna COVID-19 vaccines to indicate the risk of heart inflammation. Meanwhile, Brazil has registered over 2,000 deaths from the virus and more than 79,000 cases overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed over 3.9 million lives and infected more than 180 million people. More in this report.
As more fatal and more transmissible variants of the coronavirus spread around the world, the political and other controversies keep stirring up. Canada projects cases to decline rapidly over the next 2 months, but Delta variant risks causing a greater than expected resurgence later this year. U.S. health officials have paused Eli Lilly's antibody cocktail therapies distribution as it failed to show effectiveness against beta and gamma variants. Experts are weighing the need for booster shots of Pfizer or Moderna for Americans who received Johnson & Johnson's one-dose vaccine. Meanwhile, World Health Organization said not supplying poor countries with vaccines is a mistake.
The world, as international community, as the world is failing. As global community, we're failing. We're repeating the same mistake as HIV/AIDS, which took 10 years to reach the low-income countries after it was already rampant in high-income countries.
Health Body's chief Tedros Ghebreyesus warned that the Delta variant has already spread in at least 85 states. Police in India's Mumbai and Kolkata cities say some 2,500 people received fake vaccines. India's richest state, Maharashtra, ordered malls and cinema halls to close, while more corpses are washing up on the banks of the Ganges. In Australia, Sydney is set to enter a hard 2-week lockdown as authorities try to contain a fast-spreading outbreak of Delta variant.
Well, I think people should prepare for the news that we've given them to date, which is the situation is worsening beyond what we would have liked to have seen this morning. And the reason for that is that the new exposure sites are outside of those areas of concern we'd highlighted.
In Indonesia, over a dozen fully vaccinated doctors died of COVID-19 as the country battles a rash of severe cases in inoculated medical workers.
Pakistan has logged 36 new deaths from COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the nationwide tally of fatalities has surged to 2,188. The ministry said 935 people contracted the virus overnight. The country has reported over 953,000 cases and nearly 890,000 recoveries so far. There are over 32,000 active COVID-19 cases and nearly 2,000 of them are critical. The ministry says Pakistan has administered over 14 million doses of coronavirus vaccines to date. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says soft image of a country can't be built by copying any foreign culture. He was addressing an award ceremony of the National Amateur Short Film Festival in Islamabad. In his remarks, Army's spokesperson Major General Babar Iftikhar said Pakistan has won the war on terror. He said now is the time for Pakistan to improve its global perception. The festival was launched by the Inter-Services Public Relations to provide a platform for aspiring filmmakers. Students from the field of media studies participated in the event, out of which 15 were awarded with international scholarships. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Azerbaijan says Armenia has been ignoring its statements about starting negotiations on a peace agreement. In a statement, Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev said there won't be peace in the South Caucasus without such a deal. Aliyev said Baku expects a positive response from speakers after last week's elections in Armenia. He added, Azerbaijan needs peace, sustainable development and foresight, not war in the region. Urging cooperation from the EU on the issue, Aliyev said Baku welcomes the bloc's involvement in regional affairs. Aliyev made these remarks during a meeting with foreign ministers of Romania, Austria, Lithuania, and a delegation from the EU in Baku. The foreign ministers will also hold talks in Armenia and Georgia after departing Azerbaijan. In Myanmar, anti-regime protesters have staged demonstrations across the country to mark the International Day Against Torture. A rights group and organizations have called for an end to the violence and action against the perpetrators. Locals in the Mandalay region accused security forces of torture and extortion. Local media reported 2 fishermen were violently beaten by troops and forced to pay over $300 each. Meanwhile, Myanmar authorities have burnt over $500 million worth of narcotics across the country. In Ethiopia, 3 employees of a medical charity have been killed in war-torn northern Tigray region. In a statement, the charity said its Spanish branch lost contact with the vehicle carrying the team on Thursday. The charity, Doctors Without Borders, said the workers' bodies were found the next day near their vehicle. The agency strongly condemned the attack and vowed to probe into the incident. The UN called for Ethiopia to launch a swift investigation into the killings. The US also called for an independent probe and said Addis Ababa bears a full responsibility to ensure aid workers' safety. At least 12 aid workers have been killed since fighting broke out in Tigray in November between center and former ruling party. In Colombia, a helicopter carrying President Iván Duque has been struck by multiple bullets as it flew near the border with Venezuela. However, a spokesperson for the presidency said no one was injured in the attack. The incident took place when the helicopter was flying through the Catatumbo region towards the city of Cucuta. It was also carrying the defense minister, the interior minister, and the governor of Norte de Santander. President Duque denounced the cowardly attack, saying he is not frightened by the acts of terrorism.
Seguiremos trabajando todos los días.
We will continue to work every day and showing that the state is present anywhere in the country. I have given very clear instructions to the entire security team to go after those who shot at the aircraft and also put the lives of others at risk. But the message is that Colombia is always strong in the face of crime.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the Pope should come to Canada to apologize for the Catholic Church's role in running residential schools. Trudeau's statement comes after nearly 1,000 bodies of Indigenous children were found in 2 mass graves. Trudeau said he spoke with Pope Francis to press the importance of an apology to the Indigenous people of Canada. Talking to reporters in Ottawa, he said the Catholic Church leadership is actively engaged in determining the next steps. Earlier, Pope Francis stopped short of a direct apology, but said he was pained by the discovery of the remains of 215 children. A federal commission's report found the residential school system enacted a cultural genocide of Canadians. In U.S. state of Florida, the death toll from a building collapse in Miami has risen to 4, while 159 people are still missing. Officials say 102 people have been accounted for so far. Miami-Dade's mayor, Daniela Levine, said 3 more bodies were pulled from the rubble overnight. At a news conference, Levine said the numbers are fluid as some residents may not have been in the building when it collapsed. However, she said the rescue operations will continue in hope of finding more people alive. Meanwhile, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has called for a timely explanation over the incident, but he added the focus remained on finding survivors. Earlier, President Joe Biden approved an emergency declaration in Florida and ordered federal assistance. The U.S. government says it has no explanation for dozens of unidentified flying objects seen by military pilots. A report on the UFOs submitted to the Congress encompasses 144 observations of unidentified aerial phenomenon since 2004. The 9-page report failed to determine whether they are advanced earthly technologies or an extraterrestrial nature. It noted unidentified aerial phenomena pose a clear safety of flight issue and a challenge to U.S. national security. The report stated that UAPs reportedly appear to exhibit unusual flight characteristics in some cases, but linked them to the possibility of sensor errors or observer misperception. The report said limited data leaves most phenomena unexplained, adding they require rigorous analysis. China has asked Japan to revoke its decision of releasing contaminated water from Fukushima nuclear plant into the sea. China's UN envoy Geng Shuang said Japan must not start the release before consulting and reaching a consensus with all stakeholders. Geng added the release is not merely a domestic issue of Japan, as it may harm public health and safety of neighboring states. He said UN nuclear agency has never endorsed or approved Japan's decision to release contaminated water into the sea. Geng made these remarks at a meeting of states parties to the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Microsoft says hackers installed malicious software on one of its systems and used information stored there to attack its customers. The company said hackers compromised a computer used by one of its employees that could have provided access to metadata. It found the compromise during its response to hacks by a team identified as responsible for earlier breaches at SolarWinds and Microsoft. The US government has publicly attributed the earlier attacks to the Russian government, which denies involvement. Microsoft said the nation-state associated attacker belonged to the group called Nobilium. The company said it has warned the affected customers. In Russia, students in St. Petersburg celebrated the end of the school year with the Scarlet Sails at the annual White Night Festival. The festival normally welcomes millions of people. This year, it was limited for school-leaving students only due to the pandemic. A large fireworks display accompanied a ship with Scarlet Sails along the English and Admiralty banks to the Winter Palace. The event first took place in the 1960s. Another business update. Oil prices climbed to their highest since October 2019, putting both benchmarks up for a fifth week in a row. Global benchmark Brent futures rose 62 cents to settle at $76.18 a barrel, while the United States West Texas Intermediate crude rose 75 cents to 74.05. Meanwhile, all eyes are on the OPEC Plus meeting on July the 1st to discuss the further easing of their output cuts from August. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.